A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
Hey everyone. My name is Joanna, and I feel like I need to share my story, a confession, if you will. What started as a seemingly harmless neighborhood dispute turned into a twisted tale of betrayal, anger, and, ultimately, revenge. If you're listening, I hope it serves as a reminder of how quickly things can escalate, and the lengths we go to stand up for the ones we love. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, one of those picture-perfect places where the grass is always manicured, children run freely on the sidewalks, and the smell of freshly baked cookies drifts through the air during the holidays. It was the kind of place where people waved hello to each other, or at least they did, up until last summer. My mom, an unwaveringly kind and gentle woman, has lived in this house for over 20 years. She worked tirelessly to provide for me as a single parent, pouring her heart and soul into making our home a sanctuary. Then there's our neighbor, Greg. He moved in a couple of years ago, and at first, I thought he was just a typical guy trying to fit into the neighborhood. But as I got to know him, I realized he was anything but ordinary. Greg is loud, brash, and, frankly, incredibly rude. He seems to thrive on confrontation, always looking for an argument, always trying to exert his dominance. And trust me, he made it clear that he had no respect for anyone around him, especially my mom. The catalyst for everything that happened came on a sunny afternoon in June. I remember it vividly because the sun shone brightly through the kitchen window as my mom and I prepared lunch together, laughing between slices of fresh avocado and whole grain bread. The smell of the garden roses wafted in, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But then, Greg decided to take his trash out, and what followed turned our world upside down. I don't know what went wrong that day. Maybe it was the way my mom had parked her car slightly askew in our driveway. But whatever the reason, Greg stormed over, his face twisted with irritation. I watched from the kitchen as he got in her face, and I'll never forget the way my mom's smile faltered, her eyes widening in confusion at the venom in his voice. "Why don't you go F yourself, Karen?" He spat, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. My heart raced as I witnessed this interaction. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. How dare he speak to her like that? My mom had always told me to take the high road, to rise above pettiness. But in that moment, all I wanted was to protect her. To lash out, to scream at him to get back into his bubble of a house and shut the hell up. But I didn't. I stood frozen, feeling the fire of injustice ignite inside me. That's when I knew I couldn't just let this go. It wasn't just a simple neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a deeper wound, a call to action. And in my heart, I started plotting my revenge, crafting a plan that would show Greg just how wrong he was to mess with my mom, and ultimately, with me. So, buckle up, because what I'm about to share is not just a story about retaliation, it's a deep dive into the chaos of emotions that come with standing up for your loved ones. Remember, sometimes the decision to fight back can change everything. As I watched Greg's face contort with rage, a familiar anger bubbled up inside me. It was suffocating, like a thick fog that made it difficult to think clearly. My mother, the embodiment of grace, deserved better than this. I could see how hard she was trying to keep her composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. I wanted to rush in, to shield her from his tirade, but instead, I stood there, paralyzed by a mix of disbelief and fury. "Why are you even talking to me like that?" Mom asked, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "This is my home, and I'm not doing anything wrong." To my horror, Greg laughed, a deep, mocking sound that echoed off the walls of our home. "Your home? Spare me. You think this is your territory? You don't even know how to park a car. You need to listen to someone who knows how to keep a neighborhood running." It felt like a slap in the face. I'd always been proud of my mom's caring spirit. She volunteered at the local shelter, hosted block parties, and always greeted her neighbors with a warm smile. And now, here was Greg, belittling her in public without a shred of remorse. I wanted to scream, to tell him that my mom was the heart of our community, not some nuisance. But I stayed silent, trapped in my own rage. Greg continued his tirade, spewing insults that cut deeper than I could have imagined. "You're just some washed-up loser pretending to be a saint. You're a joke, A pathetic little Karen that everyone laughs at behind your back. That was it. It was as if I had been waiting for the dam to break, and his words were the final straw. I could see my mother's face turn pale, her eyes welling with unshed tears that I was desperate to wipe away. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce urge to shield her from the wickedness of his words. It was like a switch flipped in me. I finally found my voice, though it wavered with the intensity of my emotion. "Greg, why don't you just get the hell out of here?" I shouted, stepping into the light. "You don't get to treat people like this. You don't get to talk to her like that." His gaze swung toward me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw surprise flicker across his face, quickly replaced by that familiar smirk. "Oh, great. The little daughter wants to play hero. How cute. You think you can protect her?" Looking back, I realized that my attempt to defend my mom only fueled the fire. The confrontation escalated quickly, Greg hurling more insults, and I matching each one with words of my own. It felt like a scene out of a movie, raw and surreal, but it was very real to me. My mom stood to the side, looking devastated, a woman caught in the crossfire of a battle she never wanted to fight. Tension filled the air, a taut string ready to snap. Finally, Greg turned on his heel, a satisfied grin plastered across his face, as if he'd just crushed our spirits. "You think you can just play the victim, don't you? Good luck with that," he called back, his laughter ringing in my ears like a curse. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just about the insults thrown. It was the sheer disregard he had for my mother, an honorable woman who deserved respect, not disdain. The betrayal sank deeper than I could have imagined, it morphed into something darker. I felt it twist in my gut, a hunger for revenge. I retreated back into the house, my heart racing. I could feel my mom's eyes on me, a mix of empathy and concern. "Joanna, please don't let this get to you," she said softly, her voice shaky. But I couldn't help it. The anger and humiliation festered inside me like a relentless storm. That evening, as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, I sat on my bed, the weight of Greg's words echoing in my mind. I imagined the look on his face when I would make him regret ever crossing paths with my family. I began to formulate a plan, an intricate scheme that would turn the tables on him, that would remind him that words have consequences. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming our dignity. And I was going to show Greg that messing with my mom was the worst mistake he could have ever made. The fire inside me began to burn brighter, fueling the determination that would soon set my plan into motion. And so it began, the countdown to my revenge. The spark of injustice ignited it. The following weeks felt like a slow descent into chaos, each day amplifying the tension that hung in our neighborhood like dark clouds before a storm. Every time I saw Greg's face, the embarrassment and anger from that fateful day came rushing back. I could hardly focus on anything else, my entire world narrowed down to thoughts of revenge and how to reclaim our dignity. It started subtly. I would notice Greg glaring at my mom when he thought she wasn't looking, or muttering under his breath whenever she walked by. It was like he relished the power he had over her, a power I was determined to strip away. One afternoon, I caught him tossing his trash into our yard as he walked by, a smirk plastered across his face, as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about his verbal assault anymore, he was taunting us, and every act of defiance chipped away at my mom's spirit. She would come inside after an interaction with him, shoulders slumped, her smile a shadow of its former self. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of what he might do next, how far his cruelty would go. And then it happened, the final straw that ignited the fury burning inside me. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the phone rang. My mom answered, her expression changing to one of confusion. I strained to hear her side of the conversation. "What do you mean, a noise complaint?" "No, we haven't been loud at all." "Yes, I understand, but..." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was the local police. Greg had called in a complaint against us, claiming we threw rowdy parties that disrupted the peace. My mom's voice trembled as she pleaded her innocence, trying to explain how we were just a quiet family who had never caused any trouble. But I could see the defeat in her eyes as she hung up the phone. Greg was using the system against us, weaponizing his anger. The thought of him enjoying every moment of our distress pushed me over the edge. I felt like a volcano ready to erupt, and I needed to act. I began to outline my plan, a series of calculated moves that would flip the script on Greg. I decided to play a long game, one that would not only expose him but also embarrass him in front of the entire neighborhood. I began gathering intel on him, piecing together the puzzle of his life. I learned that he had a dog, a notoriously loud and obnoxious bulldog named Spike that seemed to have been bred for chaos. I watched as he would leave Spike outside for hours, the poor creature barking incessantly, disturbing the entire block. That's when inspiration struck. I quietly began to unsettle the foundations of Greg's carefully constructed facade. I'd go to the local dog park, making sure to mention to fellow dog owners how Greg's dog was a nuisance, how he was always barking, and how Greg never seemed to care. It didn't take long for the whispers to spread through the neighborhood. Soon, I was hearing murmurs, people commenting on Greg's lack of responsibility as a pet owner. It gained momentum, a tiny snowball rolling down the hill, growing larger with each passing day. I could see the discontent in the eyes of our neighbors as they exchanged stories about Greg's dog in hushed tones. I also discreetly started documenting everything. I installed a few cameras around our home, capturing Greg's antics when he thought no one was watching. Videos of him yelling at Spike, cursing at the mailman, and even throwing trash onto our lawn. Every clip I collected added fuel to the fire of my plan. I knew I'd use that footage when the time was right, turning the neighborhood against him like he had tried to turn us against one another. But the situation escalated even further when Greg retaliated against my growing influence in the neighborhood. Suddenly, our driveway was no longer just a minor inconvenience, it became his focal point for drama. He called the city on us for zoning violations, claiming my mom's garden was an eyesore and a hazard. The doorbell rang one afternoon, and a city inspector stood on our porch, clipboard in hand, ready to critique my mother's pride and joy. "Your neighbor has filed a complaint about your garden," he said, looking uncomfortable. "I'm here to inspect it for potential violations." I felt the heat rise within me, ready to unleash. This wasn't just about my mom's garden anymore, it was an attack on her spirit, her happiness. I watched as the inspector walked through our yard, jotting down notes, and each click of his pen felt as though it was carving a deeper wound in my heart. The inspector was polite, but his demeanor was serious, and I could tell he was trying to remain impartial. My mom stood beside me, her face pale as she watched her beloved garden, a sanctuary she'd nurtured for years, come under scrutiny. As if sensing the tension, Greg leaned against his fence, arms crossed with a smug look on his face. I could see the satisfaction in his eyes, a gleam that said he had won. In that moment, everything crystallized for me. I felt a switch flip in my mind, a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I could no longer just sit back and let him tear my mother down. It was time to put my plan into immediate action, no more passive-aggressive tactics. This was about reclaiming our space and our peace of mind. The revenge I had been plotting was no longer a mere thought, it had morphed into a mission, and I was ready to fight for my mom, for our home. After the inspector left, I sat down at my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I crafted a detailed plan. The first step? Rallying support from our neighbors, those who were also fed up with Greg's antics. I knew they existed. I had overheard enough conversations at the dog park and during grocery runs to realize I wasn't alone in my disdain for his behavior. I created a private group on social media, inviting those who'd shared their frustrations about Greg. It was a small yet significant step, but the reactions were immediate and overwhelming. Soon the group was filling up with messages of support, people sharing their own stories about how Greg had mistreated them or their property. I could feel the energy building, and it fueled my determination. Next, I gathered the evidence I had collected over the weeks, videos of Greg's dog barking incessantly, clips of him arguing with neighbors, fighting with the mailman, and even littering. I was building a case, a digital dossier of sorts, to present to everyone who would listen. I wanted to expose him for who he really was, a bully hiding behind a facade of authority, and I was going to make sure he was held accountable. It was during one particularly heated neighborhood meeting that my plan reached its peak. The topic arose about Greg's complaints against various families, and I saw my opportunity. I stepped up, shaking with adrenaline but resolved. "I have something to share," I announced, grabbing everyone's attention. As I played the clips from my phone, there was a palpable shift in the room. Gasps filled the air as my neighbors watched Greg's outbursts, his disregard for property lines, and the chaos he unleashed on all of us. I saw heads nodding, expressions changing from disbelief to anger. I took a deep breath, trying to harness the nervous energy swirling inside me. "Greg has been bullying us for too long," I asserted, my voice steady, emboldened by the support of everyone around me. "He's been using petty complaints to scare us and control us, but we are stronger than that. We need to stand together. Let's show him that we refuse to be intimidated anymore." It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The moment I finished speaking, a wave of murmurs swept through the room. Neighbors began to nod and share their own experiences, each story adding fuel to a fire I'd started. A few brave souls even spoke up, echoing my sentiments. "He made a comment about my garden too. I caught him throwing trash into my yard last month. My kids are afraid to play outside because of his dog." It felt like the dam had finally burst, and in that moment, I could see the shift in momentum. Greg was no longer the untouchable bully, he was becoming the neighborhood pariah. And then, I saw him, standing at the back of the room, his face a mask of rage as he clutched the doorframe. The realization hit me like a shockwave: I had turned the tide. The power was slipping from his grasp, and he was losing control. In that instant, I knew this was just the beginning. I had ignited a movement, a coalition of neighbors united against one man's cruelty. I was determined to ensure that Greg would not only regret the words he had hurled at my mother but also the way he treated every single one of us. As we concluded the meeting, I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had found my purpose in this fight, my pursuit of justice for my mom and our community. The fear that had once gripped me now transformed into a fierce resolve. The next phase of my plan was already forming in my mind, my strategy evolving with as the meeting adjourned. I felt a surge of adrenaline and a sense of clarity wash over me. It was no longer just about my mom and her dignity, it was about sending a message to Greg and reclaiming our sense of community. I had ignited a spark, and now it was time to fan it into a roaring fire. My plan had several key components, each carefully structured to ensure maximum impact. I wanted to make Greg feel the consequences of his actions, not just from my family but from the entire neighborhood. Here's how I mapped it out. 1. Building a coalition. The first step was to solidify the support I had gained during the meeting. I reached out to my neighbors and proposed regular gatherings where we could share our stories and devise strategies to confront Greg together. Each week, we would meet in someone's backyard, sharing snacks and support while tightening our bond. I made it a point to remind everyone how powerful we could be when united, transforming our individual grievances into a collective roar. 2. Documenting everything. I continued to gather evidence of Greg's behavior. I set up cameras strategically around our properties, capturing not just his outbursts but also Spike's incessant barking and the chaos that seemed to follow him wherever he went. I encouraged my neighbors to do the same, recording their own interactions with Greg and his dog. The more footage we collected, the stronger our case became. It was crucial to show that Greg wasn't just targeting us but was a nuisance to the entire neighborhood. 3. Public awareness. Next, I created a neighborhood newsletter, the kind that would normally highlight community events and families' accomplishments. However, I decided to leverage this platform to inform everyone about Greg's ongoing antics. I crafted a special column titled Neighborhood Watch, where I would share not only the genuine community news but also updates on our fight against Greg. I included snippets of our gathered video evidence, anecdotes from various neighbors, and encouraged others to join us at future meetings. The goal was to ensure that everyone knew he wasn't just a local nuisance but a serious problem that needed addressing. 4. Rallying for support. After establishing our community newsletter, I organized a neighborhood block party, an event designed to celebrate our unity while highlighting the need to stand against Greg. I invited everyone, emphasizing that it would be a chance for neighbors to connect, share stories, and voice their concerns. My goal was to create an atmosphere of solidarity that would put pressure on Greg and show him he could no longer operate without accountability. 5. Further heightening tensions, during the block party, I intended to have a few key speakers, people who had endured Greg's bullying firsthand. I encouraged them to share their stories openly in front of the group, amplifying the message that we wouldn't allow his behavior to go unchecked. I envisioned a moment when the collective voice of our community would echo in defiance against Greg, drowning out his taunts. I wanted him to realize that he was outnumbered, and the tide had turned. 6. Writing a letter. After the block party, I wanted to take a more formal approach. With the backing of my neighbors, I planned to draft a letter addressed directly to Greg. In it, we would outline our collective grievances, the events leading up to this point, and the community's expectations moving forward. This letter would serve as an official warning, articulating that his actions had consequences, and if he continued down the path of harassment, we would be forced to elevate matters to local authorities. 7. Escalating to local authorities. Should Greg choose to respond with hostility or continue his behavior without consequence, my plan included enlisting the help of local law enforcement. With ample evidence of his verbal abuse, noise complaints regarding Spike, and our documented experiences, I would propose that we file a formal complaint against him. If necessary, we could even explore the avenue of a restraining order, demonstrating our commitment to protecting ourselves and our families from his aggression. 8. Public awareness campaign. I envisioned one final act that would make it impossible for Greg to escape the repercussions of his actions. I wanted to organize a small rally outside the city council building, inviting local media to cover our story. It would serve as a public demonstration of our solidarity and determination while shining a light on Greg's behavior. I could already picture the news reports, my fellow neighbors standing alongside me, united in our demand for respect and accountability. We would no longer be victims, we would be a force for change. 9. Personal face-off. As a final touch, I planned to have a personal confrontation with Greg. I envisioned a moment when he would feel completely isolated, standing alone as the neighborhood rallied behind me. I would approach him calmly, armed with evidence, and the day of the block party arrived, and the air buzzed with anticipation. I had never been more nervous in my life, but also fiercely determined. The community had rallied behind my vision, and we had transformed the backyard of one of the more outspoken neighbors into a lively gathering filled with food, laughter, and a sense of unity that had been missing for so long. Colorful banners flapped in the breeze, and the smell of grilled burgers mixed with the sweet scent of lemonade, creating an atmosphere brimming with positivity. But lurking underneath it all was the tension of knowing Greg would likely show up. He always did, eager to assert his dominance. I didn't want to think about how he'd react to the gathering or the fact that we'd all come together to stand against him. For weeks, I had rehearsed this confrontation in my head, preparing myself for the showdown that felt inevitable. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting soft golden rays over the party, I saw Greg approaching. He strutted over, his posture radiating arrogance, his bulldog Spike at his heels. The gleeful chatter faded momentarily as he stepped into our midst, a dark cloud on an otherwise clear day. My heart raced as I locked eyes with him, feeling the collective tension in the air. "Wow, what a pathetic gathering," he sneered, looking around at the laughing families and children playing. "Are you all really this desperate for attention?" "Sad." The crowd tensed, his words cutting through the light-hearted atmosphere like a knife. But I felt my resolve harden. I couldn't let him intimidate us. I stepped forward, taking a deep breath as I prepared to confront him. "Greg, this is about more than just a social gathering. It's about standing up against bullying," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "You've harassed my mom and made this neighborhood hostile for so many of us. We refuse to let you get away with it any longer." Laughter faded to silence, and I could feel the collective energy shift as my neighbors began to gather behind me. Greg's smug expression faltered slightly, and that made me bolder. "You think you can bully us into silence, but we're done being quiet," I continued, my voice rising with conviction. "We're here to show you that we're united, and we won't let you tear us apart anymore." Greg's eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger boiling within him. "You think you're all so clever, don't you?" He spat, stepping closer. "This little charade won't change anything. You're nothing but a bunch of losers crying for attention. You think you can take me down?" I swallowed hard but pressed on. You underestimate the power of community, Greg. Together, we're stronger than you'll ever be. In that moment, I saw the shift in my neighbors. Heads nodded in solidarity, their expressions shifting from fear to empowerment as they stood with me. One neighbor, an elderly woman who had kept quiet for far too long, stepped up beside me. "We're tired of your behavior, Greg. It's time you realize that we won't tolerate your bullying any longer." The crowd began to murmur in agreement, emboldened by the shared sentiments of frustration. I could feel the energy rising, a unifying force pushing back against Greg. The tide was turning. Greg's demeanor darkened, and his bravado began to crack under the weight of our collective strength. "You think you can just come together and intimidate me?" he barked, looking around for support, but found none. "You all don't know what you're messing with." That's when I decided to leap into action. I produced the letter we had drafted together, filled with the collective experiences of my neighbors, along with the evidence we had gathered. "We're not just voicing our grievances, we're standing here letting you know we have documented everything you've done." With trembling hands, I held up the papers, the weight of countless stories, of fear, anger, and hurt, translating into tangible proof of his reign of terror. I continued, "We're not afraid to take this to the authorities. You've crossed a line, and it ends here." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in Greg's eyes, the bravado slipping from his grasp. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, trying to regain control of the conversation, but the energy around him was shifting. "We're not here to argue anymore," I declared, feeling the thrill of empowerment surging through me. "We're here to take our neighborhood back." The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of hope washing over us. The power of community was palpable, and suddenly Greg looking back, it's surreal to think about how that one confrontation changed everything. The energy at the block party was electric, the roar of our united voices drowned out Greg's attempts to regain control. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that we could reclaim our neighborhood from his grasp. Greg's reaction was as explosive as I had feared. With the crowd against him, he sputtered a few more insults, but they fell flat in the face of our collective resolve. As he stormed off, I could see the realization dawning on his face: this wasn't just a petty brawl anymore, it was a full-blown revolt. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect of that day became evident. Word of the block party and our united front spread throughout the neighborhood. My neighbors began coming together more than ever, hosting potlucks and gatherings, sharing laughter and stories we hadn't exchanged before. The sense of community that had been slowly eroding was being rebuilt, brick by brick, laughter by laughter. But Greg wasn't willing to take his defeat lying down. He retaliated, of course, attempting to vilify me and my family to anyone who would listen. He spread rumors, claiming that we were the real troublemakers, that our noise complaints were fabricated, and that we were trying to bully him out of his own home. I knew he thrived on chaos, and it was almost predictable how he'd act. Yet, with the support of my neighbors, it didn't matter as much as it once had. We organized a neighborhood watch, a simple yet effective means to keep an eye on each other and address any further tumult. I even reached out to the local police, who were surprisingly supportive after hearing our accounts. It felt liberating, knowing we had resources to back us up if needed. It wasn't long before they began patrolling the area more frequently, just a simple presence was enough to deter Greg from his antics. As time went on, the tension between us simmered down, but the scars from the ordeal remained. Greg would still glare at us from his porch, attempting to assert his dominance with nasty looks, but they no longer held any power. Each time I saw him scowling, I felt the thrill of victory surge through me. I was reminded that my actions had made a difference. The collective strength of our neighborhood had put an end to his reign of bullying. Then came the day of reckoning. We had invited the local news to cover our communal efforts to reclaim our neighborhood. I stood there, proud as I watched my neighbors recount their experiences and share stories of how we had come together. The piece aired just before the evening news, and what followed was a wave of support from others in the community who faced similar struggles. However, I never expected Greg's reaction. He came over that evening, furious as ever, demanding to know why we put him in such a negative light. It was surreal to see him so unhinged, so desperate. "You think this is over?" he spat, face red with rage. I stood my ground. It was never about being over, Greg. It's about understanding that we won't let you bully us anymore. Your actions have consequences, and we're just getting started. With that, I turned my back on him, feeling the solidarity of my neighbors behind me. The sense of closure was palpable. For all his threats and bluster, he had lost the power he once wielded so effortlessly. Months passed, and slowly, Greg faded into the background of our neighborhood's dynamic. He still lived there, but his presence was muted. He learned the hard way that the community wouldn't tolerate his behavior any longer. It was during one of our neighborhood gatherings, where the laughter rang out like music, that it hit me: we had transformed. The community once splintered by fear was stronger than ever, forged in the fires of conflict. Yet, as I sat back, watching my mom laugh with neighbors she had never really talked to before, a deeper thought lingered in my mind. Revenge had given way to something more profound, a sense of belonging, unity, and understanding that comes only when we're willing to fight for each other. But at what cost? Did it change my relationship with Greg? Did it change me? I pondered the complexities of human nature and how revenge can ignite a fire, but it can also illuminate the path to healing. In reclaiming our neighborhood, I had also learned the true power of compassion and community support. As I gazed at the joy surrounding me, I realized that sometimes, it's not the act of revenge that defines our journey, but rather the lessons we learn along the way. I would forever treasure the strength of my neighbors, the resilience of I never thought I'd find myself in a position where I'd be plotting out revenge like some twisted character in a movie. But here I am, fingers trembling as I type this confession, wondering if I'm the villain in my own story. The sun had just begun to set beyond the skyline of our city, casting long shadows that stretched across my living room floor, and it made everything feel a bit more ominous. My small group of friends and I were all bound by the same invisible thread: our insatiable desire for laughter and camaraderie. There was Sophie, a fierce redhead with a laugh that could shatter glass; Ethan, goofy and tall, who always seemed to have the perfect one-liner to lighten the mood; and then there was Maya, a shy but clever soul who could weave magic with words. Together, we formed our own little sanctuary, a bubble against the chaos of the world outside, until Ryan invaded our space. Ryan, with his perfectly tousled hair and self-satisfied smirk, was a force of chaos. The kind of guy who thrives on belittling others, his every word dripped with condescension. You know the type, he'd throw out a cutting remark with a casual laugh, as if it were all just a game. I can still picture that day in the coffee shop, the air thick with a rich scent of roasted beans, as he leaned back, arms crossed, and ridiculed Sophie's art project for an upcoming exhibition. The laughter from his circle echoed like a cruel chant, fueling his ego while leaving our fragile selves bruised and silent. What hurt the most wasn't just the words but the companionship that fell apart under their weight. It was watching the sparkle in my friends' eyes dim, their laughter turning hollow. I felt this simmering anger coiling inside me, a warmth that turned icy as I watched them suffer at the hands of this prick. There was an urge within me, a whisper that spoke of justice, but I never expected it to escalate to the level it would. Our group made a pact that day, silent yet palpable. Maybe we couldn't confront Ryan directly; after all, he thrived on confrontation, but we could fight back in our own way. I don't know when the idea fully formed in my mind, but it was as if a dark cloud began to roll in, obscuring the bright sky of my conscience. We started sending him those ridiculous Diarrhea audio clips, and with each one, it felt a little more satisfying, like a wicked game we were all playing. But as the months went by, the laughter soon shifted. What began as an innocent means of reclaiming our power morphed into something darker. I could feel the weight of our shared secret pressing down on my chest, a secret that thrived in the shadows of our friendship, threatening to spill over into something truly vile. I now realize that revenge has a way of twisting itself, much like the chaos Ryan had unleashed upon us, and I was about to learn just how tangled it could become. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the thrill of our little rebellion transformed. I had thought the audio clips would be a harmless prank, a way to trickle revenge into Ryan's arrogant life without directly confronting him. But the more I watched my friends react, Sophie's contained giggles turning into full-blown laughter, Ethan's dramatic reenactments of Ryan's bewildered expressions, the more I could feel it morphing into something toxic. But nothing could have prepared me for the night everything unraveled. We were hanging out in my living room, laughter spilling over as we prepared to send Ryan yet another clip. The room was filled with the aroma of popcorn, and the soft glow from the fairy lights danced around us like ethereal fireflies. But the mood shifted when Maya paused, her eyes darting nervously to the floor. "Are we really doing this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible amidst the chaos. The question hung there, heavy and oppressive, and I could see the unease etched across her face. "What's the harm?" I shot back, the defensiveness creeping into my voice. "He deserves it." He made Sophie cry. Sophie's laughter stilled, replaced by a wrinkled brow of concern. "But is this who we want to be? Do we really want to stoop to his level?" I felt a stab of irritation at her hesitation. It felt unjust, as if she were undermining the bond we were forging against our common enemy. The inner turmoil began to churn. But what if we don't respond? What if we just let him win? I countered, trying to mask my growing uncertainty with bravado. But her eyes were wide, searching. Then, that night, a text came through. It was from Ryan, and my heart sank upon reading it. "Wow, you losers think you can get to me with your childish pranks? I feel sorry for you. Keep it coming, it only proves how pathetic you all are." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I could hear Ryan's laugh in my mind, the very sound that had driven us to this point, ringing in my ears with renewed force. Confusion and disbelief washed over me. Didn't he see how much we were hurting? Didn't he realize that he was the reason we had resorted to this misery? But then, I felt the anger seeping back in, igniting like a match struck against gasoline. I remembered the scorn in his voice, the way he'd so easily dismantled Sophie's passion as if it were nothing more than a school project. "It's not childish, it's just revenge," I muttered under my breath, but even I could hear the unconvincing tremor in my voice, like a child defending a lie. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and sent Ryan a particularly crude audio clip. The laughter from my friends washed over me, a wave of temporary relief drowning out my doubt. But then came the silence. The realization that I was no longer just a bystander in this twisted game. I had crossed the line, and it terrified me. As the days blurred together, I found myself scrolling through my messages, searching for any sign of regret in Ryan's responses, but it never came. I could practically feel him smirking, his confidence seemingly unshaken. I began to suspect that maybe he had seen this whole exchange as a joke, a game to keep him entertained. My inner turmoil turned into a festering wound that refused to heal. I could see the toll our revenge had begun to take on my friends. Sophie's laughter dimmed, replaced with a cloud of uncertainty that lingered in her eyes. Ethan, ever the joker, adopted a tense bravado, throwing out jokes that felt more like desperate attempts to lighten the growing heaviness in our group. And then there was Maya, the kind-hearted girl who once effortlessly filled our conversations with clever insights. She drew further away, her silence speaking volumes as she retreated into herself. Every time I glanced at our group chat, the glee we'd once shared felt laced with an uncomfortable undercurrent. Our initial sense of empowerment started to morph into paranoia. The more we sent those clips, the more I felt the need to justify our actions to myself. I would replay the sound of Ryan's disdain in my head, willingly choosing to believe that our revenge was righteous, but the doubt kept creeping back in. And then came the day. It was a dreary Wednesday, the kind of day that felt heavy even before it began. I had barely settled into my morning routine when I received a slew of notifications. My heart raced as I opened them one by one, only to find screenshots of Ryan's latest social media post. Tagging our small group, he had taken to his followers, calling us the Diarrhea Squad, complete with a compilation of our audio clips and a caption that read, "When your friends have no real talent, they resort to low blows. Keep it coming, losers." Sweat pooled in my palms as I could feel my face flush with embarrassment. The humiliation washed over me like a cold wave, freezing me in place. He had turned our attempts at revenge into a spectacle. My eyes darted around the room, half expecting my friends to appear and laugh it off, as if everything was fine. But when I glanced at the group chat, the atmosphere was thick with shame. Maya was the first to respond, "This isn't right. We shouldn't be dragging this on." Sophie chimed in shortly after with a nervous "This isn't what I signed up for." Ethan, trying to diffuse the tension, threw in a half-hearted joke, "Hey, at least we got a cool nickname." Diarrhea Squad sounds like a band. But even he couldn't mask the gravity of the situation. As the nagging sensation of betrayal began to seep through me, I felt an isolation settle in. The friends I thought I could count on were now looking to distance themselves from the mess we had created. My own sense of righteousness began to crumble under the weight of my shame, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. I could feel my isolation deepening as I realized that I was the architect of this nightmare, the villain in our story, and my friends were already plotting their escape route. The next few days were a blur. I watched my friends withdraw, their texts growing sporadic, each message laden with uncertainty. I could sense their judgment hanging in the air when I suggested sending one more clip, an idea that suddenly fell flat. Their eyes darted to the floor, and the laughter died on their lips as they shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just stop," Sophie whispered one evening, her voice trembling as if the weight of an unspoken truth threatened to break her. But rather than finding solace in our vulnerability, I felt a surge of anger erupt within me, fueled by a mixture of betrayal and fear. How could they turn on me now? Didn't they see that this was all we had left to fight against Ryan's cruelty? Without thinking, I dismissed them all, my angry retort echoing in the silence that followed. "You think he's going to stop just because we do? You don't know him like I do." My voice felt foreign, heavy with raw rage and desperation. It was a moment of recklessness, a storm of emotions that I couldn't contain as I hurled my words at my friends, who stood there, wide-eyed and taken aback. But as the words left my mouth, the reality of the situation hit me harder than any punch could. I was fighting a battle, yes, but the war was against myself. In a flash, I saw not just Ryan, the prick who had tormented us, but the monster I was becoming. My friends weren't just backing away from the fight, they were backing away from me. I was losing the very people I had bound myself to in this reckless act of revenge. That night, I sat alone in my dimly lit room, the silence pressing in on me like a heavy fog. I scrolled through our group chat, rereading messages filled with laughter, warmth, and a sense of belonging that felt worlds away now. I could barely recognize the camaraderie we once shared, the easy conversations about our dreams and aspirations, now overshadowed by this twisted game we had created. Suddenly, a gnawing sense of dread washed over me as I replayed Maya's words in my head. "This isn't right." She was right. We were no longer just defending ourselves against Ryan's cruelty. We were perpetuating a cycle of negativity that was tearing us apart. I realized that every audio clip sent brought us closer to being just like him, petty, vindictive, and small. The final straw came when I stumbled across a video of Ryan that someone had uploaded, showing him with his friends, carefree and genuinely laughing. The image burned into my mind. Here was a guy who thrived on the misery he caused, and yet, here he was living rent-free in our heads while we were trapped in our own personal hell, clinging to the desperate notion that our revenge was justifiable. A wave of shame washed over me, cold and unrelenting. I felt sick to my stomach. Who had I become? I had allowed Ryan to dictate my actions, to drive a wedge between me and my friends. I was spiraling, and somewhere deep within me, a voice whispered that this was my moment to break free from the cycle, not just for my sake, but for the sake of my friends, who I had merely driven away. That night, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I messaged the group, a trembling question that felt like both a confession and a challenge. What if we just stopped? What if we changed the narrative? The response was slow in coming, but when it did, it felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Maya replied first, her words filled with hesitance but an undercurrent of relief. "I think it's for the best." One by one, Sophie and Ethan began to chime in, their reassurances and support forming a fragile bridge back to the friendship we'd nearly lost. As the conversation unfolded, I could feel the weight lifting, like a curtain being pulled back to let in the light. Maybe we could find a way to reclaim our peace, to rise above the pettiness that Ryan had sparked within us. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt as though we could do it together. In that moment of vulnerability, I realized that revenge did not have to define us. We could choose empathy over anger, laughter over bitterness. As I stared at my phone after that pivotal conversation, a new idea began to form in my mind. A way to take back our power without continuing the toxic cycle Ryan had forced upon us. The thought sparked excitement within me, and I couldn't help but smile as I put together a clever plan that promised not only to reclaim our dignity but to show Ryan that we were not the pathetic losers he thought we were. The first part of the plan was deceptively simple: we would stage a distraction. I knew Ryan loved to be the center of attention, so I suggested we host our own event, a talent show of sorts, but with a twist. Each of us would showcase something creative or ridiculous, but instead of focusing on our performances, we would encourage everyone in our friend groups to help create the buzz around it on social media. The goal was to draw attention away from Ryan and onto us. The more we stood in the spotlight, the less power Ryan would have over us. It was time to take control of our narrative. We would create a dedicated hashtag for the event, something catchy that would make Ryan curious and desperate to know what was happening. I envisioned hashtag #NoToBand with the squad, and I could practically hear the collective eye rolls and laughter from my friends. The idea was to flood our social media feeds with positive affirmations, art, and goofy moments to drown out Ryan's mocking posts. If he wanted to engage with us, he would have to step into our world, which was filled with joy rather than petty revenge. Next, we had to orchestrate a direct invitation to Ryan, but this time, it would be different. We would send him a formal invite to our talent show, complete with an absurdly playful design. I crafted the message, blending sincerity with sarcasm. Dear Ryan, your presence is requested at our inaugural talent showcase. We would be honored to have the esteemed judge of all things talentless witness our mediocre creations. Date and time, TBA, we know you have a busy schedule. The plan was to make him feel included, to draw him back into our circle while flipping the script. I wanted him to see us not as the pathetic losers he labeled us, but as a group of friends having fun without him, an exclusive event he was missing out on. On the day of the talent showcase, we transformed my living room into a makeshift stage. Each of us prepared our acts, a mix of singing, bizarre skits, and even dance-offs that bordered on the ridiculous. I created a PowerPoint presentation filled with inside jokes and images from our shared past that captured our friendship and laughter. The goal was to celebrate us and remind ourselves of the bond we had formed, even in the midst of the chaos Ryan had instigated. We agreed to keep Ryan updated through our group chat. As we shared pictures and videos leading up to the event, we made sure to include little nods to the joy found in each other. I could feel the anticipation building, as if we were reviving the true essence of our friendship, and each post felt like a small victory against the negativity Ryan had cast over us. The night of the talent show arrived, and with it came a wave of nervous energy. We live-streamed the event to our friends and followers, and even though Ryan hadn't yet, the energy in the room crackled with anticipation as we adjusted the makeshift stage lights, casting a warm glow across the gathered faces of my friends. My heart raced, and the atmosphere pulsed with a cocktail of excitement and fear. We weren't just putting on a show, we were staging a rebellion against the dark cloud Ryan had cast over our lives. With the cameras rolling, Sophie kicked off the night with her rendition of a pop song, a mix of pitchy notes and nervous laughter that had us all in fits. The room erupted with applause and cheers that echoed against the walls, a sound that felt like pure magic. Each performance drew us closer. Ethan's awkward dance moves drew out tangible, bubbling laughter, his goofy, exaggerated motions painting smiles on our faces. And then, it was my turn. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the improvised stage, holding the microphone with a shaky grip. The room fell silent, eyes fixed on me, and for a moment, I felt vulnerable. My fingers fumbled, but then I remembered what we were doing. We were reclaiming our narrative, we were more than the Diarrhea squad. I launched into a heartfelt monologue, recounting the chaos Ryan had brought into our lives. You know, it's easy to tear someone down, but what's harder is lifting each other up, I said, my voice steadying as I caught the supportive glances from my friends. Tonight, we choose joy. We choose laughter. We choose each other. The room erupted in ovation. As I stepped back from the mic, the weight I had carried for months began to lift, a wave of relief washing over me. We weren't just mocking Ryan anymore, we were celebrating the very essence of who we were as a group. After I stepped down, I fought through the nervous energy bubbling in my stomach, wondering if Ryan would show up, but I shook off the thought. It didn't matter. We had each other, and we were doing this for us. Ethan had a surprise act planned. He and Sophie had teamed up for a skit that involved a mock interview with an imaginary Ryan, complete with exaggerated impressions and playful jabs. As they mimicked his condescending laugh and smug expressions, I could feel the tension draining away. The room roared with laughter, a sweet echo of the companionship we thought we lost. And then, as if the universe conspired to align our energies, just as the laughter peaked, Ryan's name lit up the group chat. "What's this nonsense? You think you can just pretend I don't exist?" The mood shifted. This was it, the moment of reckoning. I glanced around at my friends, their expressions revealing a mix of anxiety and excitement. "Let's not let him ruin our night," I said, my voice rising with conviction. "We're having fun. We're reclaiming our joy, and he can either be part of it or sit in his misery." I sent him a response, not laced with animosity, but with an olive branch. "We'd love for you to join us, Ryan. We're celebrating friendship tonight. Maybe you'll learn something." The message was bold, a defiant challenge wrapped in humor. The thrill of uncertainty hung in the air. Silence enveloped our little gathering for a heartbeat as we awaited his response. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. Would he take the bait? My friends looked around, bouncing hints of nervous anticipation off one another. Ryan's reply came through seconds later, and as the night wore on, the joy we had reclaimed began to weave a new thread into our lives, stitching together the frayed edges of our friendship. Laughter rang through my living room as we finished the final act of the talent show, and I felt a warmth spreading in my chest that years of Ryan's torment had almost stripped away. Despite the echoes of his words still lingering in our minds, we had turned his taunts into a celebration of resilience. But in the aftermath of our performance, a heavy silence fell when I took a moment to glance at the group chat again. Ryan had responded. A screenshot appeared on my phone, his reply flashing like a lightning bolt. "You think this is cute?" It said, "Really? You'll always be the Diarrhea squad to me." I felt the familiar clench of anger rise in my stomach, but this time, I was anchored by the laughter and warmth surrounding me. Sophie saw my face change, her hand gently squeezing mine. "Don't let it get to you," she whispered, and I took a deep breath. Ryan's words no longer had the power they once did. The reality of that night was tangible. We had chosen joy over bitterness, and our friendship was now fortified by it. But then came the ripple effect of our little rebellion. The next day, our talent show went viral, within our friend group circles, shared, reshared, and even dubbed a must-see. The name Diarrhea Squad transformed into a badge of honor, a cheeky symbol of our triumph over Ryan's toxicity. At work, my colleagues approached me, laughter in their eyes as they shared clips from the show, and for the first time, I felt pride swelling within me instead of shame. Yet, Ryan's presence still loomed over us, like a storm cloud threatening to spoil our bright sun. I overheard whispers in the hallways as people began to pick sides, some laughing with us, while others, still under Ryan's spell, chose to deride our light-hearted revenge. It stung, but I found solace in the smiles of my true friends. Maya, ever the perceptive one, pulled me aside one day, her voice low but earnest. "I'm proud of how we stood up for each other," she said, "but we shouldn't let him take up space in our heads anymore." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words as a sense of clarity washed over me. In that moment, I decided we would take our power back entirely. We began crafting a response video, a direct rebuttal to Ryan's mockery. Our intention was not to hurt him but to shift the narrative. We wanted to redefine our group, to show everyone, including ourselves, that we were more than someone else's punchline. We invited friends to share their own stories of overcoming bullying, of defying the negativity around them. The video turned into a montage of laughter and heartwarming tales, capturing the essence of our friendship and the strength we had found together. Instead of being defined by Ryan's scorn, we became a beacon of hope and resilience. Just as we were ready to launch the video, another text from Ryan came through, filled with snide comments and sneers. "Trying to be inspirational now? Good luck with that." In stark contrast to those words, the final product of our creation was released, and the reaction was overwhelming. Our friends rallied around us, sharing not just our video, but their own, and with every share, every like, we felt an incredible rush of affirmation. The laughter came flooding back, a reminder.
Hey, I'm Kimberly. If you're listening to this, I guess you could say I'm deep in the throes of a twisted tale, one I never expected to live out. It's raw, it's personal, and it might just hit close to home for some of you. So grab a seat, because this story is a roller coaster, and it all starts in the bustling heart of Chicago, where beneath the shimmering skyline, I found myself entangled with a man who would turn my world upside down. The moment I met Derek, it was as if he had stepped straight out of a romance novel. With his charming smile and that effortless charisma, he could light up the darkest rooms. Everyone adored him, and at first, so did I. He was the life of every party, the guy who effortlessly navigated conversations and had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. But, as they say, nothing is ever as it seems. We met at a trendy coffee shop called The Daily Grind, a place filled with the rich aroma of fresh espresso and the sound of clinking cups. I had just moved to the city, struggling to find my footing after a tough breakup, and Derek seemed to embody everything I thought I wanted. We hit it off instantly, or at least I thought we did. Little did I know, I had unknowingly signed up for a masterclass in manipulation. My closest friends, Sarah and Mia, were wary of Derek from the start. They'd roll their eyes and give me that knowing look whenever I mentioned him, but I brushed aside their concerns. "You're just jealous," I'd chuckle, oblivious to the cracks that were beginning to form in the facade he had so skillfully crafted. They couldn't see what I saw, the dreamy moments, the late-night conversations filled with laughter. They hadn't felt the rush of excitement that came with every text from him. But it didn't take long for the reality to seep in, like a slow poison. Over the course of the months, the charming persona began to unravel. With Derek, love was an illusion wrapped in a shiny bow, but soon, that bow began to fray. His need for validation morphed into control. Every compliment he'd given me was laced with a condition, and every loving moment was followed by a sting, a reminder that I was never quite good enough. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself caught in his web. Friends and family became distant memories. I was isolated, a prisoner in my own mind, questioning my worth with every dismissive glance he threw my way. I watched helplessly as he perfected the art of gaslighting, turning my reality into something I couldn't recognize. But here's the twist that no one saw coming, not even me. It was during one of those late-night conversations when he casually mentioned his ex-girlfriend, Emily, with such disdain that it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he spoke, the venom behind every syllable. That's when the seed of revenge was planted in my heart, and from then on, it would grow into a twisted obsession. Now, as I sit here, recounting this bizarre chapter of my life, I realize that revenge isn't just a plot in a story, it's a journey, a path I never wanted to walk, but here I am, ready to take the first step. And this time, it's my turn to be heard. It's time to face the narcissist of the highest caliber and show him that I won't be silenced any longer. So, buckle up as I unveil the thrilling and dark details of my plan, the lessons learned, and the indelible mark this experience has left on me. Revenge may not be sweet, but oh, was it ever satisfying. The day everything changed began like any other. The sun streamed through my apartment window, filtering through the thin curtains as I sipped my morning coffee, an elixir of hope I clung to in the dwindling light of my reality. Derek had stayed over, his presence a magnet that drew me in, yet I felt horrified by the shadows lurking behind his charming smile. That day, I should have sensed the storm brewing beneath the surface. Instead, I was blissfully ignorant. I had planned a dinner for us, hoping to rekindle the magic we once had. I wanted to show him that I still believed in us, that I still believed in love. I meticulously prepared his favorite meal, hoping to recreate those early days filled with laughter and warmth. As I stirred the sauce, my heart raced with excitement. Finally, I thought, maybe tonight would be different. But the moment he walked in, his expression shifted. I felt that familiar chill creep down my spine as he glanced around, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face as he realized I hadn't done enough. "Did you actually think I'd want to just eat at home tonight?" he sneered, shrugging off my efforts as if they were nothing more than a pathetic joke. My heart plummeted. I had poured my soul into that meal, and he had tossed it away like yesterday's trash. Trying to regain my footing, I suggested a nice restaurant nearby. But instead of appreciation, I was met with a dismissive wave as he turned toward his phone. He was scrolling, immersed in his own world while I stood there, a ghost in my own home, feeling the walls close in around me. Hours later, after yet another failed attempt at connection, I snapped. "Why do you treat me like this? Why do you make me feel so small?" I blurted out, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and defeat. He looked up from his screen, genuinely taken aback, as if he had no idea what I was talking about. "Oh, come on, Kimberly. You're being dramatic," he replied, veering into that all too familiar territory, belittlement. "You're lucky to be with me. Just look at yourself. A little self-awareness would go a long way." Those words cut deeper than any knife. It felt as if he had stripped away my entire identity, layer by layer, leaving me raw and exposed. Had I really let myself be reduced to this trembling shadow of who I once was? The realization crashed over me like a wave, and suddenly, the memory of Emily resurfaced, haunting me like a specter. I remembered how he had disparaged her, how he'd made her seem vindictive and malicious when all I could see was a woman who had once loved him. I felt her pain morphing with my own, intertwining in a desperate plea for justice. That night, it hit me: Derek didn't just manipulate me, he was a master of emotional destruction, a narcissist who needed to feel superior at all costs. I had been a pawn in his game, but not anymore. In that moment of anguish, something inside me snapped, igniting a fire that I never knew existed. I could either wallow in my misery or channel that rage toward something more powerful, something that would show Derek the truth of his own cruelty. The next day, I turned my focus toward Emily. I reached out to her, my fingers trembling as I typed the message. I told her everything: how he spoke of her, how he treated me, and how I had seen the cracks in his facade. Through exchanged words, I found a friend in her, a comrade who had suffered at the hands of a man who had no regard for anyone but himself. Little did Derek know, I was beginning to plot a way to expose him, to unveil the intricate web of lies he had spun around all of us. As I worked with Emily to gather evidence of Derek's manipulation, text messages, stories of emotional abuse, and shared experiences, I could feel my resolve strengthening. No longer would I remain a victim, cowering in the shadows of his toxic behavior. I wanted Derek to feel the same despair, the same sense of loss that he had inflicted on so many. With each passing day, my emotions transformed from sorrow to determination. I was no longer just Kimberly, the love-struck girl. I was a force to be reckoned with, fueled by the betrayal and injustice I had endured. As I prepared to set my plan in motion, the realization settled in that revenge might not only offer satisfaction but a sense of closure I had yearned for since the very beginning. And so began my journey of vengeance, drawing the curtain back on the narcissist of the highest caliber, Derek, who had underestimated the strength that lay dormant within me. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed a shift in my demeanor. The quiet resolve I had uncovered began to give way to a darker energy, a thrill that coursed through me with each piece of evidence I gathered against Derek. My emotions, once a chaotic storm of love, confusion, and despair, turned into a laser-focused mission. However, as I delved deeper, things escalated in a way I hadn't anticipated. Derek was clever. He could sense the change in me, the way I had begun to stand my ground during our conversations. His charm faded into annoyance. One evening, we were out with friends, and I dared to laugh a little too freely, sharing an inside joke with Mia. I could feel his gaze burning into me, his hostility palpable. Afterward, he pulled me aside, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're so funny, don't you? You think your little games will make me forget who's in control?" The threat hung heavy in the air, and I felt the cocktail of fear and anger twist in my stomach. But it only fueled my resolve. I was no longer a puppet dancing to his tune, I was the knife hidden beneath the silk. Each verbal jab he threw my way, every belittling comment, solidified my plan. It became a sick game, who could outwit the other. I toyed with the idea that if he was going to play the villain, I might as well play the part of an avenger. Then there was that night, the night that would ignite the chain of events that would lead to my ultimate confrontation with him. I had spent hours preparing for a party Derek was throwing at his apartment. As I set out my outfit, something daring, something confident, I felt empowered. But the moment I walked through the door, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, I was hit with a tidal wave of Derek's narcissistic energy. His attention was fixed on me, but it wasn't admiration I saw, it was barely contained contempt. "Wow, you clean up nice, Kimberly," he said, with a smirk. "Did you pull out all the stops for me tonight?" His friends laughed, but it was the way he said it, like I was a cheap, hastily assembled outfit he picked up at a discount store. I held my chin high, the resolve I'd been nurturing bubbling to the surface. "I'd say I'm dressing for myself, not just for you," I replied, feeling an unfamiliar heaviness lift from my chest. But that only seemed to agitate him more. Throughout the night, he would make snide remarks, cutting glances in my direction whenever I engaged with others. It became an unbearable game of humiliation. He was artfully weaving a narrative that turned everyone against me, painting me as dramatic and overreactive. As the laughter of his friends echoed through the room, I felt invisible, drowning in my own agony while he thrived in his kingdom of narcissism. The tension was suffocating. I had to get out. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony, cold air wrapping around me like a lifeline. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Emily. "Don't let him get to you. Remember, you're strong. You can do this." Tears stung my eyes as I read her words. She had become my anchor in this storm. I took a deep breath, wiping my eyes and trying to reclaim the courage I felt slipping away. But just then, the door swung open, and there he stood, Derek, the embodiment of chaos. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded, his tone sharp, slicing through the serene night. "Hiding? You know, you're not that special. Don't think you can just decide when to show others your little strong side." I felt that mix of anger and despair crash into me again. "I'm not hiding. I'm taking a moment because being around you is exhausting," I fired back, each word resonating with the determination I had been cultivating. His eyes darkened, and he stepped closer, invading my personal space, his breath hot against my face. "You think you're tough, huh? You're just a scared little girl trying to prove herself. You don't want to mess with me, Kimberly. You have no idea who you're dealing with." His threats sent shivers down my spine, but within me, that fire blazed brighter. I wasn't scared. I was emboldened. I stood my ground, meeting his gaze unflinchingly, and in that moment, I realized how far I'd come. The little girl he once berated was now on the cusp of destroying the very foundation of his carefully crafted world. My heart raced as I held my ground, feeling the tension pulsate between us like an electric current. Derek's face contorted with rage, and I relished the madness in his eyes. He thought he could intimidate me, toy with my emotions like I was a marionette dangling on strings he controlled. But as I stood there, bathed in the pale light of the moon, I felt a shift inside me, an awakening, a clarity that sliced through the fog of despair he had wrapped around me. "You don't scare me anymore," I declared, the words spilling from my lips like molten lava, hot and fierce. A strange sense of power surged through me, igniting that ember of revenge I'd been nursing for weeks. In his twisted world where he wore the crown, I suddenly saw the path laid out before me. What if I could turn the tables and show him that the very tactics he used to manipulate and belittle could be his downfall? In that moment, I recalled how he had spoken of Emily, his ex-girlfriend, with such venom. It had ignited something in me then, but standing here now, it felt like a complete revelation. I no longer wanted just to survive, I wanted to dismantle his empire of deceit brick by brick. I envisioned Emily by my side, the two of us standing tall against the tide of Derek's narcissism. He had painted us both as weak, but together, we could be formidable. "Tell me, Derek," I pressed, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning within. "What are you so afraid of? Is it that I might actually stand up for myself? That I might expose you for who you really are?" For a moment, he looked taken aback, as if my words were foreign to him. His bravado wavered, and I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Was he truly the all-powerful ruler he believed himself to be? "I'm not afraid of you, Kimberly," he spat, but I could hear the lie woven into his tone. "You're nothing without me." And that's when it hit me, the realization burned brighter than anything I'd felt before. I had spent so long believing I was nothing without him, that I needed his validation to be whole. But in this moment, in this raw confrontation, I felt the shackles of his control shatter around me. I was not just the girl he had manipulated, I was a woman rediscovering her strength. It was time to take action. I was ready to harness this newfound clarity and use it as a weapon. I had the power to expose him, not just to myself but to everyone in his carefully curated world. He had crafted a narrative where he reigned supreme, but I realized that I could rewrite that story, our story. The thought of Emily standing by my side filled me with determination. I could almost hear her laughter, feel her unwavering support echoing through my mind. Together, we could make him regret ever underestimating us. I wanted Derek to feel the very loneliness he had inflicted upon me, to face the emptiness of a world stripped of his facade. The plan began to take shape in my mind, crystallizing like a clear picture in a foggy room. I needed to gather evidence, text messages, voicemails, any trace of his cruel words and manipulative tactics, and I needed to do it fast. I imagined a confrontation that would leave him exposed and vulnerable, revealing the monster beneath the charming mask. Suddenly, I saw myself standing before a gathering of friends, the very people he had manipulated into believing his lies. I would unveil the truth, letting darkness spill into the light. The only way to eradicate a narcissist of the highest caliber was to shine the spotlight directly on him, and I was ready to take that step. As I turned to walk back into the party, I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. The shadows of uncertainty and self-doubt began to dissipate, replaced with a fierce determination. Derek would no longer be the puppeteer pulling my strings, he would face the consequences of his actions. With Emily's support and my resolve, I was no longer a victim, I was a warrior ready to wage war against the man who had tried to steal my light. As I stepped back into the party, I felt a smile dance on my lips, a predatory smile filled with purpose. I would make Derek pay, not out of spite but to reclaim the narrative he had woven around our lives. I was ready to step into the darkness and confront the narcissist of the highest caliber, and I would emerge victorious. I spent the next few days spiraling with excitement and anxiety, plotting every detail of the plan that would serve justice, not only to Derek but also to the countless others who had fallen victim to his charm. The scheme unfolded like a blueprint in my mind, each layer intricately designed to expose him in a way that would leave no room for denial or manipulation. The foundation of my plan hinged on concrete proof of his manipulative behavior. I contacted Emily, and together, we started documenting everything. We crafted a shared folder on Google Drive, a secret repository for our evidence. I gathered screenshots of all the text messages where Derek belittled me, where he flirted with other women while I languished in silence. I even recorded his voice during our conversations, where the insidious gaslighting seeped out like poison. Emily shared her experiences, recalling Derek's condescending messages, his dismissive comments, the times he had belittled her achievements. It was cathartic for both of us to validate each other's pain. We were no longer isolated victims. Instead, we became allies against a common enemy. Our compilation of evidence grew daily. Each entry filled me with a mix of dread and excitement, as if I were collecting ammunition for the battle ahead. But I kept reminding myself that this was not just about revenge, this was about reclaiming our identities and standing up against his brand of cruelty. Next, I set out to cultivate a network of allies. I reached out to mutual friends to gauge their perspectives about Derek, subtly steering conversations toward stories of his behavior. Some friends revealed their discomfort with how he treated me, while others admitted they had witnessed similar moments of his arrogance and condescension with Emily. The more I sought out these opinions, the more emboldened I felt. Mia and Sarah played pivotal roles in preparing for the climax of my plan. They were fiercely loyal and supportive and offered to be part of the gathering I envisioned, a gathering where Derek would finally be held accountable. I began painting a picture of a dinner party, an evening where everyone would have a chance to contribute to the conversation, to shed light on the toxic nature of Derek's behavior. I secured a date for the get-together, an elaborate dinner at my apartment. I meticulously planned the details, aiming to create an atmosphere that felt warm and inviting, yet charged with tension. I invited close friends who were already skeptical of Derek, those who had seen his true colors but hadn't had the opportunity to express their feelings in front of him. On the night of the dinner, the table was set to perfection, adorned with candles and delicate floral arrangements. But behind the facade of normalcy, I felt the weight of anticipation in the air. Emily arrived early, and we shared a knowing glance. Our battle was about to begin. As guests trickled in, the energy shifted. Laughter and chatter filled the room, but I felt my heart race as I anticipated Derek's arrival. When he finally walked through the door, I could see the flicker of arrogance in his eyes, the charming smile ready to distract everyone from the truth lurking beneath his surface. Dinner progressed with typical small talk, but I knew the time would come soon. As we shifted to the living room, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. It was time to unveil the truth. I took a deep breath, knowing this was my moment. "Thanks for coming, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite the quiver of excitement flooding through me. Tonight, I wanted to celebrate friendship, and also to shed light on something serious. I know Derek has shared stories of his past relationships, particularly with Emily, and I believe it's essential that we discuss the impact his behavior has had on those around him. Gasps erupted from some of my friends, while others exchanged furtive glances. Derek's face paled. For a moment, the mask slipped. "Are you serious?" he scoffed, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "This is ridiculous. I thought this was a friendly dinner, not an attack." I pressed on, undeterred. "This is an important conversation, Derek. We're all friends here, and friends should support one another. Emily, would you like to share your experiences?" As Emily stood to speak, I could see Derek's expression shift from incredulous amusement to a mask of growing panic. He opened and closed his mouth, searching for words but unable to form a coherent response. Emily's voice rang out, powerful and unwavering, as she recounted the moments of emotional manipulation she had endured, the feelings of inadequacy that had plagued her long after their relationship ended. Step 5. The tension in the room thickened as Emily spoke, her voice steady and filled with emotion. Her words poured out like a dam bursting, igniting memories and feelings among the guests that had long been buried. I thought I was crazy, you know. I believed I was the problem, she said, her gaze unwavering as she turned to Derek. But now I see that it was you all along. You twisted my reality until I no longer recognized myself. Derek's face flushed crimson, the mask of charm slipping further as sweat beaded on his forehead. The laughter and lightness of the evening were replaced by a palpable tension, with everyone hanging on Emily's every word. I remember the moments when you would play mind games with me, Derek, she continued, her voice rising with conviction. Every time I tried to voice my feelings, you'd turn it around on me, making me feel like I was overreacting. It was suffocating. I could feel Derek's eyes darting around the room, searching for an ally, a foothold in the chaos unfolding around him. But the faces of our friends, Mia, Sarah, and even some of Derek's own buddies, had transformed from friendly smiles into expressions of concern and empathy. The power dynamic was shifting, and I reveled in it. Listen, this is all nonsense, Derek interjected sharply, desperation creeping into his tone. You're both just bitter ex-girlfriends trying to ruin my night. You need to grow up. Is that really your defense? I shot back, cutting through his attempt at dismissal like a knife. Do you think calling us bitter will erase the truth? You've spent your life creating this illusion, this perfect facade, and it's time we brought it crashing down. As I spoke, I felt a surge of power wash over me. The words felt like a rallying cry, a declaration of my newfound strength. The room felt charged, as if everyone could sense the reckoning at hand. Let's not forget the countless times you made people feel inferior to you, I continued, my heart racing. How you belittle Mia's achievements or mock Sarah's dreams. You don't get to play the victim anymore. Derek's facade of confidence began to crack, his snide remarks replaced by a creeping terror as the weight of our words pressed down on him. He was trapped in a corner, and we were the hunters ready to make a kill. You think you can just bully everyone into silence? I asked, my voice firm and unyielding. You've thrived on fear and insecurity, but tonight, that ends. We will not be silenced any longer. The guests began murmuring in agreement, and for the first time, I saw the tide turn. People began to share their own stories, their own moments of discomfort around Derek, moments he had brushed off as trivial. Laughter began to fade as the gravity of what he had done seeped into the atmosphere. One friend, Jason, spoke up. I remember when you made fun of me for not landing that promotion, Derek. You laughed and said I'd never be good enough for the job. It's time you faced the consequences of your actions. Each voice added weight to our collective truth, and with every word shared, Derek's bravado dwindled. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting back and forth, desperately trying to regain control over the room. But the truth had broken through his carefully constructed walls, and it felt so liberating. Derek, I said, leaning in slightly to catch his gaze, you've manipulated all of us for too long. But this isn't just about revenge, it's about healing. It's about reclaiming our power and standing against the toxicity you represent. As I spoke those words, the mood shifted further, almost like the clouds parting to reveal the sun. There was an energy in the room now, a shared understanding of the reality Derek had tried to obscure. The shock on Derek's face morphed into a mixture of rage and disbelief. You all are just jealous. You can't blame me for your failures, he spat, desperately attempting to shift the narrative. But it was too late. The cracks in his facade were showing, and the unraveling had begun. Jealous? No, Derek. We're tired, I corrected him calmly. Tired of feeling like we have to walk on eggshells around you, tired of your egotistical behavior that steals the light from everyone else in the room. It's time for accountability. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's bravado had all but collapsed, leaving him exposed in front of the friends he had once commanded. It was then that I noticed the glimmer of recognition in the air hung heavy in the room after our confrontation, like the final notes of a symphony cascading into silence. Derek stood there, a broken man, stripped of the power he had so skillfully wielded. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes: he was no longer in control of the narrative. I felt a mix of exhilaration and disbelief as the weight of everything that had transpired began to settle in. What happened next was almost surreal. With every word spoken against him, I felt a layer of my own pain lifting. Friends who had once viewed me with sympathy now surrounded me with support, offering nods of understanding and words of encouragement. They shared their stories of courage, resilience, and the struggle of breaking free from toxic relationships. It was as though we were weaving an invisible tapestry of healing, each thread intertwining our experiences, casting a warm glow over the room. But for Derek, the atmosphere shifted from one of camaraderie to an abyss of humiliation. He could only stand there, dumbfounded, as the weight of our shared truths pulled him down into despair. Emotional outbursts rolled through his being, first denial, then feigned laughter, and finally, anger bubbling forth like a volcano ready to erupt. "You're all making a mistake," he spat, voice laced with venom. "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm better than all of you." At that moment, the laughter and camaraderie faded into a solemn hush. I watched as my friends exchanged looks of concern, their faces revealing a mixture of sympathy and frustration. They weren't there to judge but to witness the reality of a man who had fully revealed himself, a man who thrived on chaos, who reveled in diminishing others to elevate his own sense of worth. My heart raced as I confronted Derek again. "You don't get to shift the blame anymore. Your words have consequences. We're not here to diminish you, we're here to reclaim our stories. And you've lost all power over us tonight." He took a step back, as if my words physically struck him. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind, trying to concoct a plan to regain his footing. But the curtain had been drawn back, and the audience had seen the dark magic behind the puppet show. Derek was no longer the king in his kingdom, he was a man standing in the ruins of his empire, surrounded by the laughter of those who had taken back their joy. As the evening progressed, I noticed how the energy shifted. Friends took turns sharing their own experiences, moments Derek had casually dismissed or belittled. It felt cathartic, like a collective exorcism, as we laid bare the wounds he had inflicted, visible or not. I glanced at Emily, who was beaming with pride as she spoke about her own journey of healing. We had turned from victims into warriors, armed with the truth. When the night finally drew to a close, the guests gradually filtered out, leaving behind a sense of camaraderie and empowerment. My apartment, once a space of chaos and despair, felt like a sanctuary of resilience. Derek had stormed out after the confrontation, his ego shattered and his reputation in tatters, but I felt no remorse for him. He had created this ripple of devastation, and now it was crashing back upon him, unraveling everything he had carefully constructed. In the following days, the aftermath of that dinner party reverberated through my life like an echo. I had expected some backlash. After all, no one ever walks away unscathed from a confrontation with a narcissist. But what I didn't anticipate was the wave of support that flooded in from my friends and family. They rallied around me, emboldened by the stand I had taken. They sent messages, called to check in, and even shared their own experiences of overcoming toxic relationships, bolstering my belief that I had not just conquered Derek, but had also created a safe space for others to find their voices. Yet, as much as I reveled in this newfound empowerment, I couldn't shake the residual feelings of anxiety that crept in. Derek had been a fixture in my life, and his sudden absence left me grappling with the remnants of fear he'd instilled in me. I realized I had to confront the emotional scars he had left behind, the invisible bruises that still lingered beneath the surface. Despite feeling empowered, I decided to seek therapy. I wanted to unlock the chains he'd wrapped around my heart and mind, to explore the depths of my own self-worth beyond the confines of his manipulation. Each session became a journey of rediscovery, where the therapist helped me untangle the threads woven into my psyche, reminding me that I was worthy, strong, and deserving of love. I also learned that revenge doesn't always mean retribution.